Let's go to the next one here about Hawaii and Maui. This is something we were tracking closely about the actual response to the disaster. And there's actually been a pretty major development after an outcry in Hawaii over a very controversial decision. Let's go ahead and put this up there on the screen. The head of Maui Emergency Services has resigned after facing criticism for not activating sirens during the fire. So I want to try and be fair to the guy. We talked a little bit about it in our last show. The reason why they said, Krystal, that they had not sounded the sirens and instead tried to contact people via the emergency text system was because they were saying the islanders had been taught to go and run towards the mountains in the event of tsunami, which is traditionally what the siren had been used for. And then since that's where the fire was, they didn't want them to go in that direction. Now, though at the same time, a lot of people were saying that because many of the other critical emergency systems failed, that by failing to pull out all the stops, it shows that you were more concerned with not throwing everything possible at the problem to alert everyone that an imminent disaster was coming, that you basically did that, and now you're coming up with said explanation afterwards. The resignation following actually the resignation after that press conference, which was a very contentious press conference actually, where the emergency service chief gave this announcement, I think does show you how much actual anger there is, not in the rest of the country, but on the island itself. Currently, the Attorney General even says that they are going to conduct an independent review of the government response and an actual investigation as to how this entire disaster unfolded. But this has become a focal point of outcry of people like, well, at least you didn't even try, you know, to give people a heads up. And when we're talking about a death toll, potentially in the hundreds, we still don't know yet what the actual death toll is on the island. But, you know, it's 100 or so right now, but very, very likely to be much higher than that. Already one of the deadliest disasters. Well, in that situation, I think it's very, very important in order to hold these people to account for what they did.
Yeah, I think that's right. And, you know, anybody can look at a moment-by-moment decision and trying to figure out what the best course of action is. And perhaps the excuse he's given is reasonable. But in hindsight, given that you have so many residents who were saying, you know, I really had no idea how dire the circumstance was, and I really didn't have enough warning to figure out, you know, a plan and be able to really protect myself and my family. I think in hindsight, you have to look and say, we probably made the wrong call, given how devastating. I mean, just to keep this in mind, guys, most devastating fire that we have had in over a century. So, you know, in 100 years of preventative measures and understanding how to control wildfires and all of this development, you know, all of that seemed to go away in this situation where you had early warning system that wasn't sounded, you had inadequate water to fight the fire, and now there continue to be a lot of complaints from residents and increasing, by the way, mainstream reporting about how slow the government response has been at all levels. And that's why we still don't have anywhere close to an accurate death count from just this horrific, tragic situation.
Yeah, and even right now, there's now scrutiny again on Hawaii Electric Grid, which appears to be the source of the fire itself. Let's go ahead and put this up there on the screen. And this just gets, you know, to even more of actual questions. Hawaiian Electric, the power utility in charge here, has been warned now for years that not only was extreme weather becoming a bigger problem, but that the company did not have enough equipment or emergency plans to prepare for sparking a wildfire. And the thing is that the closest state, California public utilities have had to pay billions of dollars in fire damages to residents for things that their power lines, down power lines, and failed safety maneuvers that they didn't look into that eventually went on to either kill people or to damage property. They were warned about it. They had an independent review in 2018, which said this is a serious problem. They'd seen similar instances in the nearest state. They didn't do anything about it. Apparently, they didn't have a highly reinforced system. There had been no hardening of their power lines that made them vulnerable to falling and to sparking fires. Similarly, they were even aware, Krystal, about dried vegetation, which was increasingly growing around said power lines, which is what made the wildfire spark so quickly. That all of this, again, comes back to everyone knew that this was going to be a problem. It's in retrospect, you'd be like, there's warning, warning, warning. You have near, you have the near state, same problem. But it's these like power utility monopolies, which are effectively accountable to no one. And let's not lie. Like these things are often rife with corruption and incompetence. You put those two things together, and now you have this horrible and deadly wildfire.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
No one wanted to pay for the upgrades.
Yeah, they just didn't want to
that
pay
needed
for
to
it.
be made, even though this exact scenario was envisioned and they were warning about it back in 2018. Okay, let me just read you this piece. In 2018, the Maui County government warned of the potential that above ground power lines that fail short or are low hanging can cause fire ignition sparks that could start a wildfire, particularly in windy or stormy conditions. That appears to have been exactly what happened here. There was a $190 million proposal from Hawaiian Electric to improve their grid. It would have, among other things, replaced aging power poles with new ones, including 80 in Maui. Energy experts said many of the company's poles were probably not strong enough to withstand winds that hit Lahaina. So you couple aging poles not ready for the strength of winds that were whipping through Lahaina, with this dried in vegetation around the electric lines, these invasive grasses. You had a longstanding drought that created these dry conditions, and it ended in a complete disaster. Another thing that they had been warned about is they needed to establish a power shutoff plan, which is something that they have implemented in California, so that when you have these incredibly dangerous situations that are known to cause potential wildfires, you can shut down the power and have a backup plan in place to run things that are essential. For example, the water pumps to make sure that they're still able to fight the fires using the water, generators to make sure that hospitals are going to be okay and people who need electricity literally to live are going to be all right. If you have a plan in place that when those high winds whip through, that can cause these kinds of problems, you can be safe and shut these things down. They did not put that sort of plan into place, and so now we have disaster. I want to show you guys, listen, this is early days in terms of investigating exactly what sparked these wildfires, but there's a video that's circulating and that news media have picked up on that may show exactly where this fire started, and it's exactly what we're talking about here. A down power line catching invasive dry grasses on fire, which then spread quickly. This is before, guys. Let's take a look at that video.
Freaking power line just went down. Try my little water hose. See them right there. That's the power line that started from up the road there, and all of that is still burning. Hey, heads up, the line is live on the ground right there. I send my family away already. Thank you. It's super crazy. And then on the other hand, it's like maybe it'll bring closure.
So that video was recorded, and it was later in the day that the wildfire really spread out of control. So possibly that was the start of it.
You can't look at the video and say it didn't that it didn't contribute. It contributed for real. Who knows? We'll look into it, obviously, and we'll continue to follow. And at the same time, you saw that guy with his hose trying to protect his house. This has become another source of contention. Let's put this up there. A lot of scrutiny right now on Maui and on West Maui in particular over their emergency management department and the Department of Natural Resources, who refused to release water immediately requested by landowners who wanted to protect their property from the fires. There was a standoff. He said he needed to go and check with his bosses. There was like a whole procedure that he was trying to follow in terms of you got to talk to the people who were in charge of the farms and the people who were owning the company property. Eventually, Krystal, the water was released to the landowners, but by the time it was, fires were already basically rampant. And, the ability in order to immediately dampen the area around you, many of the people are on the island are furious about the conflict on the water management because they say that they could have saved either their farms or their property should that have happened. And it's not just about property. I mean, people, died in this fire. Yeah. And it's, people died, they lost their lives, and then we have hundreds of billions of dollars of damage here. And now there's a whole question of, obviously, what we're talking about in terms of land development use. The state says they're going to buy it. Are they actually going to buy it for the residents? these snaking real estate developers are already moving in on this. So this whole thing, it's far away. And so, like we talked about earlier on our show, the East Coast, they're aware of what's going on, but they're not tracking and following the developments closely as if it were to happen in Boston or Washington or New York or something like this. But this is a real scandal, I think, whenever you look at the multi-tiered response to this.
The water piece is really complex and really devastating. And because there have been long-standing ideological divisions on Maui, this is similar to the sort of disputes that you see in the Western U.S. About who has the right to the water and how is it distributed, et cetera. And so the question here is, did ideology get in the way of, in these past power struggles over who owns the water and who has a right to it, did that get in the way of an effective fire response? That is the allegation from a lot of people. And then the last thing to mention is that President Biden is actually taking a break from his vacation to fly into Hawaii today to survey the damage. And, I'm sure he's going to, if he gets any residents near him that have a chance to give him an earful about how they feel about the response so far, I'm sure he's going to hear quite a bit about the lack of visible federal government response.
Thank you, Mr. President, for taking a break from staying at billionaire Tom Steyer's house, of which he claims he's renting for fair market value, which is great, in Lake Tahoe. Thank you for taking a break during that second vacation, actually, this month, in order to visit Hawaii after you originally said no comment. That's the American leadership that Americans have come to expect.
Yes.
All right.
Shamed him into doing it, so glad that he'll be there. Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.